Welcome to the NEXTER chat for December 2020 here at Dysart & Jones. Today we're talking with John Richardson, who is now Director for North America of SOLUS UK. If you haven't looked at SOLUS, do have a look. SOLUS is a technology company that I saw with John, I guess 2 or 3 years ago. They've been around since 2012. They now have 6,000 applications of their library app, which is a mobile app. They are not librarians. They have a soft spot for libraries. They're not librarians. They are technology people. John is not a librarian. He's a businessman. And he has always worked, well, I've known John for years. He's been in the library sector for more than 30 years. First with Multilist, if you're old enough, you remember that. Then with Polaris, then went really early into linked data, because he saw the importance of having partnerships, synchronization with Google for the content, for the inventory within libraries. And then he started to look for something like SOLUS came out with, which was originally their Gizmo, but a real library app, like the entire library as a mobile application. John has always looked at ways of doing development, we may call it business development, for libraries and different types of partnerships to make sure that they are truly integrated. For instance, in this NEXTER chat with John, he talks about the fact that libraries need to scale. So you don't just have a partnership with a social agency to be able to do a program. You look at libraries in markets, in communities, like many communities where housing is taking off, and the library has a partnership with every real estate company and is on every real estate agent's website with a link to the library, because the library is the place where people come for information about the community, for information about doing mortgages, for financial planning programs, etc. So listen in.
Will continue to be, and that is something that might benefit. My transition to Zafira, wow, that was fantastic. I had met a woman that used to work with us out of Ohio. Her name was Vicki Mueller, and she married.
She worked with you at Polaris.
At Multilist.
Oh, at Multilist, okay.
Multilist. She was an implementation librarian for us on the US side. At any rate, she married Eric Miller, who had worked at MIT. He was working with the W3 consortium. He worked with Sir Tim Berners-Lee for a period of 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
And Vicki said, JR, you have to see what Eric's working on. This stuff is cool. And it certainly was. It was introduced to linked data, and I had gotten a little wind that Polaris may be purchased by an outside company. And so the timing was good for me to make that leap over to Zafira. And your listeners may recall that Zafira was the contractor to evolve the BibFrame model, which is the planned replacement for MARC in a version 1 framework. And of course, the goal from Eric, because he worked with the W3 C3 group for so long, was to how do we take library data and extend it into a format that the rest of the world could ingest and or utilize. Right? Makes so much sense from that. So the BibFrame model 1 was really looking at how to transition the elements of MARC into resources, if you will. And then LC had some internal staff and some other contractors to evolve to BibFrame 2.0 and continuing. One of the business opportunities that Zafira saw was this transformation. Librarians have put in millions of dollars of cataloging effort, and how can we leverage that into the new universe, if you will. So they developed some it's not really conversion tools, it was transformation tools. So a MARC record, of course, has all these different links to publishers, subject headings, subdivisions of, etc. And when you transform MARC records into linked data, into BibFrame resources, it was about a 4-to-1 relationship. So if you had 100,000 MARC records, that would equate to 400,000 unique identifiers, and they're all linked.
Right.
So the subdivision of every subdivision of a subject heading that will link to everything else in the universe, so to speak, within that library's ecosystem. And the library.link network was then created to, now we need to start putting and linking everybody else's records in there.
Right. And when did you start that one? The library?
That was in 2014.
Okay, so it's only 6 years ago.
Right. One of the interesting things on the library link network was, from Eric's modeling of BibFrame, if you go back to the early days of OCLC, to catalog a MARC record, Harvard would look at it and say, no, we need to add value to that record to make it special. So they'd make a duplicate of that. And back when memory was expensive, disk space was expensive, and University of Michigan would look at the record and say, oh no, that's not good enough for our needs. Crazy, right? If we look at that behavior, it's crazy. But Eric thought, well, wait a minute, there's one the president is missing. Yeah, we have some different formats, and yours might be a signed edition, but that's just little bits of metadata to add to the master record. So the old model that OCLC kind of created for their WorldCat is not, doesn't play nice into the Google complex, because what Google wants is to have things local. I'm looking for movies near me. I'm looking for a coffee shop near me. I'm looking for a title near me. So it was really an exciting time to learn all about some of this universe and to have meetings with Library of Congress and sort of see where their headspace was at. The Peace Progressive Cataloging Cooperative Group and some of the large players out there, Harvard, Columbia, Stanford. So sitting in on some of those cataloging discussions on how the MARC record will transition into the BibFrame model. And they're getting a little carried away, making it too library centric. And Zafira's mindset always was make sure this stuff can play really well in the web world.
Right.
From that.
Right.
So the library.link network was created to sort of link various library collections together. And this works in the United States now. Google's a syndication partner with them. So if I typed in the Chicken Sisters, I just did that here, and it'll show you on the knowledge graph, it'll show you the author, a little description of the book jacket cover. You can buy it here or borrow it. Perfect. So the borrow it then links to the library link network and saying who's within the close proximity that would have this particular asset. One click, you're taken to it. And if you're a patron, then you can check it out or place a hold. If not, there's a link to register as a new patron.
Right.
So the initial focus that Zafira had was sort of the Google syndication. And I came to find out that that was just a small, teeny piece of it. And I'd love to give you some examples on how I think linked data can help libraries. If we look at...
where are we with linked data? Like, who are the real players in linked data right now?
Well, that's a great question. The Germans have been doing some good work in that space. Ex Libris has been doing some BibFrame modeling and working to support both MARC and BibFrame in the back end of the system. Mm-hmm. Innovative is exploring with their new discovery layer, Vega, of incorporating some linked data in there. So linked data from the library perspective, I think it's still sort of an evolving space, if you will. OCLC is certainly doing some good work in that space, and Stephen made comment about NISO yep. Also from that. So there's a variety of groups, and there's kind of the top-down NISO, sort of OCLC and LC, and then there's sort of grassroots of things that are bubbling from the bottom. So one of my laments about public libraries in Canada, the US, and abroad is the declining membership base that they have.
Yep.
And I'm a big fan of counting opinions data. I poke in there quite a bit. And when you read strategic plans of libraries, 80% of them would all have something about, we need to plug into the community. We need to engage with the community.
Oh, yeah.
So they say the words, but there's never a how do we do that.
Right.
And if we look at sort of the counting opinions data, each province and state collates data, and the numbers are pretty weak and pretty pathetic. Some large urban libraries are at 22% of the service population. So the one I'm referring to is 1 million population, and only 22% have library cards. It would be a frightening number to find out how many of those are actually active patrons.
Right. And plus, we know there's a big disconnect between the activity on those library cards, which is just borrowing.
Yes.
And there's no connection to how people, or if people, the same people, are participating in programs or events.
Yes.
So we don't know. Right. Okay. You already know this. It's a big bone for me.
Yes. And there's some, counting opinions, and perhaps Baker and Taylor with their bibliostat are adding additional elements through the state libraries or provincial libraries to track the data. But they don't know, for example, how much does it cost to put on a program?
Right.
How many hours are involved to create it, and then how many hours or resources required to execute it? Those aren't really tabulated. So back to the problem of patrons. Going after onesies and twosies, a family here, a family there, is extraordinarily expensive and almost a waste of time.
Right.
So with the library.link network, there's an ability to easily create widgets. And these are things you can embed in an HTML-enabled newsletter, on a Facebook or social media feed, from that in a SharePoint portal, into other applications. So some examples of that would be, if I'm in a modest size, a community of 100,000 or 200,000 people, some of my large community groups, it could be an Alzheimer's Association, it might be Rotary, Lions, Kinsmen, sort of those service outlets. And if you go to them and say, hey, we've got some widgets that we can put, because the libraries have such great collections, and it'd be pretty hard to find a community group where libraries don't have existing content, and print, that support that community group's mission.
Right.
So if you map out within a community saying, who are the biggest players and who has the most membership in each of these sectors, and then we can provide on their newsletters, web pages, mobile apps, what have you, of here's all these great resources the library has that support our mission. So now we're wanting to get dozens or hundreds of people to sign up, not just onesies and twosies.
Right.
When we also think about not-for-profit groups and local leaders, some of the examples I would have is the Girl Guides. They already know the curriculum for the next season, and an enterprising person could say, I want to go to my local library and find suitable resources, create a little widget, and I'll blast out an email to all the parents saying, here's complimentary information on each of the topics that the girls are going to experience or learn.
Right. Right.
To kind of close on that chapter.
And where is that now, JR?
So anyone that has subscribed, Cersei Danix is a reseller partner. They call theirs Blue Cloud Visibility. And I'm not sure if Innovative is still a reseller of that or not, but Novelist is. So one example that I know of is DC Library, District of Columbia Library. They're a subscriber to it, and I believe it was right around 100,000 interactions of people finding stuff on the web or in a social media feed or some other embed that drove traffic back to the library.
Back to the library.
From that for an interaction from that. So the stats are starting to crank up. And when you think about a library collection, it's whose collection is it? Well, it's the community's.
Right.
And this is one of, there's probably other types of tools that could be used, but this particular one I'm familiar with is very easy to parse out pieces of collection that matter to this particular group at this particular point in time.
Right.
So that,
Right.
I think, can really help drive up the patron usage. And the complement to this is collection development. Libraries have an not so great track record of ordering material that's DOA, dead on arrival. And if you talk to Baker and Taylor or Ingram or White Hots, that number can be anywhere from 12% on up to 30+%, which is mind-boggling. You would buy a resource.
They're not working with the White Hots of the world, correct?
Right, because they're working to streamline, those numbers used to be there, but they're trying to bring them down to that 9, 10, 11, 12%, which is never going to be a perfect match. So there are products out there that say, hey, we'll review your circulation and holds, and we'll help inform you on what to buy.
Exactly.
So to me, that's doing this. Why? Because you only have 20 to maybe 40% of your service population checking out material, right? And if you're continuing to buy for that group, you're missing this other universe. So again, if you're using some of these smart tools and say, hey, we know the Rotary or the Kinsman or the Alzheimer's group, we're going to buy assets and resources to support this group, right?
Right.
And what if we acquire materials specifically for them and they promote the heck out of it through all of their different channels? And the thought process there would be that, yes, libraries should do much better with those circulation elements from that. Stephen made a good comment here just on BibFrame and linked data, just a little side. The real potential of BibFrame/linked data is to create on-demand customer research reading journey mapping proactively instead of the retroactive model embedded in LibGuides.
Right.
And to extend the journey beyond the library's collections to people networks, self-help communities, the dark or wider web unseen by Big G and more.
Right.
So that's a good compliment there. Thank you, Stephen, for that comment. So, collection development, I think, has a real opportunity to serve community groups and to try to drive the patron base up. And so maybe two problems with one element there.
Yeah. You've been involved in all of that for so many years. And so tell me, because I was with you, I think one of the first times that you met the guys.
Yes.
The two, Neil and Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah, great. From SOLUS. And you were, we were, of course, having drinks. I'm sort of talking with them about the gizmo at that time. And
yes.
So tell me how you ended up working with a startup in the UK.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So my charter at Zafira was really to get early adopters. We signed up about 12 of them, a pay to play, raised maybe $500,000 for the proof of concept. And then the charter was to set up distributors. So Cersei Dynix, Innovative at the time, Novelist, and EBSCO. And then that was sort of my charter. And I'd met Neil and Andrew of SOLUS, the founders. They're based in Glasgow, Scotland. At a Kasugi user group, I think, and they were trying to navigate the Cersei Dynix universe, which development, the leadership, the ecosystem, the user group. There's lots of different pieces for a third-party partner to come into that space. So we had drinks and started chatting. I was quite fascinated with what they were doing. So the SOLUS environment is kind of driven by a content management system with some pretty brilliant middleware. And that middleware uses API calls to there's, I think, 12 different ILS systems or LMS platforms that are integrated with their mobile app. So they started out interestingly in digital signage, which took off quite well in Australia and the UK. And we sort of held off in Canada and the US just because of the large geography and hardware requires maintenance. So sort of said, put that on hold, focus on the mobile app. So they've done very well in Australia, the UK, and we're wanting to expand in the US. And they had just signed a distributorship agreement with SOLUS for, they branded it Blue Cloud Mobile. And they did tremendous work replacing their older Bookmine product. And interesting, we just acquired the Boopsy division, and just light research there, Boopsy started mobile apps in 2005.
2005, right?
That's like forever ago.
I know.
And today it's still surprising to me how many libraries don't have a mobile presence. Many are relying on a responsive design website that's, you know, an okay experience perhaps. So it was quite fascinating for them, and they knew my Rolodex for Polaris sites was quite great, and my 30 plus years in the library industry knew a lot of folks. So they said, we'd like you to come on board and help us grow our North American market from that. So the SOLUS app is in 5,600 locations, something on 5 different continents, if you will. And they're in 24 plus languages. So that's something that Americans really suffer badly at. They develop applications in English to start with, and then they build an architecture, and then it's very challenging sometimes to add additional languages.
Exactly.
So if you build the environment to support that initially, and up you go. So the mobile app was kind of the basis, and of course they did all these interactions on how do you look at the My Account information, display bib record, display item record. Well, SOLUS has fantastic APIs, and so they're looking at this Gizmo unit. I don't have one here with me, but the Gizmo unit is a handheld for staff, and it's an Android tablet, but it's really the size of a large iPhone or Android phone.
Yep.
And it has a little slip cover, and it has an RFID reader. You can write to tags. It has a barcode scanner and a small receipt printer, thermal receipt printer. So it's really this mobility that allows library staff to start doing very creative things in the library. We went through 2 generations out there in the field. There's maybe 200 units out in the field the libraries have tested over in Australia, and we wanted to make some hardware changes to it. A little more memory, faster processor, more receipt paper, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a new unit, and then COVID hit.
Right.
So there's a couple of interesting things they did in the COVID universe, but back to the Gizmo unit. You think about the cost of tagging, RFID tagging. So CleveNet wants to be an early adopter of the Gizmo, and their simple use is we have pallets of material arrives at the loading dock.
Correct.
We put them on carts, we haul them about 2 blocks into our building, we add tags to them, and half of that stuff goes back out the building to member libraries or branches to satisfy holds. So wouldn't it be great if we can, right at the loading dock, is use the Gizmo device, scan barcode, yep, add tag, yep, that process takes 4 or 5 seconds. We then get the trap to say, hey, this thing belongs in branch X or member library Y. It goes in an immediate bin. So just that simple little process there would save unbelievable number of hours per week.
Right. For those that haven't seen this kind of Gizmo, and I want to come back to, you know, why we would do that instead of just putting the app on people's phones. But the Gizmo is really like the Moneris handheld or any handheld that you can pay on, right? You just tap and pay. And that's exactly what the Gizmo looks like. Well, I haven't seen it for a couple of years, so I'm assuming it's still, you know, a big thing, little bigger than
yeah,
that.
It's a little thicker, right? Than a typical.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it has the promise of changing operational processes. So I mean, I really wanted it when I was in the public library because it's the one way to let people truly be interacting with members, potential members, anywhere that they are, right? But why would we go with the gizmo? What's the difference between the gizmo and having the app on my phone to do my own checkout, which is what the library app from SOLUS lets me do now?
Yeah, great question on that. So through COVID, SOLUS accelerated their development efforts to allow patron self-service with the barcode or the 6 providers of RFID tags, the common vendors out there. So with a iPhone 7 or greater on iOS 13 or greater, Android phones from about 2014, there's the ability to check out barcodes or check out with RFID, and it'll flip the security bit for those libraries that have security gates. And they don't have to go to any other hardware device in order to walk out the door. Right. So it's a brilliant strategy. And we started that work, and we thought that that was going to be a slow burn, and then COVID hit, and of course now this has become much more of a hot topic. Yeah, so the mobile app is really more from a patron-centric point of view, that they are looking at downloading an ebook, looking at their holds, paying a fine or a fee, placing holds, looking at their account, switching a language, types of things, searching the catalog, searching events, other links that the library may have had. So really patron-focused functions. On the Gizmo side, it's really staff-driven functions. And for any of you that have gone into an Apple store, it was the first time is usually a pretty positive experience if they're not overwhelmed with people. But the checkout is the big thing, is that I can check you out wherever you are in the Apple store. You don't have to wait in any checkout line. So some of the immediate uses that our early pilot group wants to do is inventory, having a device that you can do both barcode reading and or RFID reading, pulling holds from the hold shelf and printing a little baby. It's not going to replace the nice, beautiful wrappers. That's a separate process. But while you're pulling material, you can jam in the little receipts and kind of speed your work. We lightly talked about tagging, RFID tagging, roaming reference, and what do you have on the gig economy? Walk with me. And what are your interests? What have you? And we find 2 materials on the shelf. Is this all you'd like? Let me check this stuff out. By the way, would you mind answering a couple of survey questions? Passing the gizmo when it's clean and safe to do so back to the patron, or it might be, gee, this is an interesting topic, why you want to know information on the gig economy. Do you know about our online databases? And most of the vendors, EBSCO, ProQuest, Gale, Cengage, have apps now. So the gizmo, being a mobile device, could have apps on there. Let me show you how it works on this, and I will forward you right now an article that's about the gig economy that might help you on your journey. So that walk and talk and get the hell away from the information desk or the reference desk. Yeah, exactly. And so in SOLUS's acquisition of Boopsy and also their alliances with Innovative, yes, is that for market share, or are there also technologies they're trying to leverage? Yes, great question. So the Cersei Dynamics partnership was fantastic for SOLUS. They caught it at a very good wave. So there's probably 250 contracts, and like CleaveNet is one of them. The Ontario Library Consortium is another one. So some large numbers of locations. Track in Alberta recently went, there are 178 libraries, I believe. At any rate, so there is kind of a market share opportunity there. And the other observation that Andrew, the CTO, has made is that right now libraries are subscribing to multiple vendors. So Overdrive being the 800-pound gorilla, but yes, Overdrive always wants to take you to their site, right? And so you kind of lose out on what's happening at the library from a local events types of things. So we're looking at seeing, and the other frustration for patrons and all of us is multiple logins. Okay, I need to log into this. I need to log into that. I need to log in one more bloody time to this. So there's some API developments there that may allow us to say, okay, I've logged in once from my account or into the library system, my account. So I'm in there. Now I want to get a Access 360 asset or a Cloud Library asset or an Overdrive asset or a Hoopla asset. Allow me to pass the token to auto authenticate me into my app on my own phone, but do it gracefully and seamlessly. So that part doesn't work yet, but we're sort of looking towards that. And so certainly our Boopsy acquisition was completely for market share. It'll be interesting to know how many we get at the end. I think we might obtain maybe between 50 to 75 customers. And it surprised me too of how few competitors there are in the mobile space. From that, OCLC just bought Capira, which is a 4-person firm. There's Communico, which has a sort of a suite of products that's done quite well in the universe. And, you know, curbside is something there that there's different approaches to solving the curbside problem. Many are based on appointments, and SOLUS went with more conventional, kind of more the consumerism approach. If I'm telling Home Depot, hey, I'm on my way, or I'm here, I'm picking up something, as opposed to having to schedule an appointment sometime in the future to go pick up my
right. I think that's one of the things about the library app, which is what Solus's product is called, that I was really impressed with. Is it's not just to sign out, but when I'm doing a pickup, I can just put in that I'm leaving my home, or I'll be there from my location, and it will send the time that I'll be there to the library. And then I just have to message the library and say, I'm here.
Yes, right.
Same as Home Depot. Yes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting there too, in that sort of interaction. There's a kind of a chat message there, and it could be valid, saying, hey, we realize this is a large print edition. Are you okay with that?
Right.
And it could be, hey, Joe, haven't seen you for a long time. I'm in the back room here, but you know, I'm communicating with you just as the meet and greet in person happens to go into a chat space type of thing. And then there's the multiple languages bit too, is Canadians get it much better than the Americans do. And sorry for the Americans, I'm not being insulting. I'm born Canadian, and I've been in the US for about 24 years, dual citizen from that. But when it comes to speaking your patrons' languages, that's a very important thing. So as you message in whatever language, as I'm picking something up and you're communicating to me in my language,
right.
Helpful types of things.
Exactly.
Yeah, so when you think about—
John,
yes.
See what Robert put in the chat here, which is most of our library consulting clients believe that curbside service will remain in place after the pandemic. So making this work easily is going to be important long term. And I have to say, I have asked for years as a library member to be able to pick up wherever I'm going. Like, for God's sake, give it to Shoppers Drug Mart and I'll pick it up there, because the library always closed so much earlier than I could get to, or it's just not in my my traffic pattern. Or even using you know, the lockers that some libraries use. Fine with me. Put it in places, put it in the liquor store, I say. That would be great. People go to the liquor store and pick up their books at the same time. Is that sort of what SOLUS is thinking too, that this is going to go on? Is that part of their strategic thinking?
Absolutely it is. And I'm not sure if we ever got out of wave one in America. We haven't been very, well, let's leave that one aside. But we do think it's going to be in play for a much longer time. We have the baby boomer generation, which is aging, and they, by nature, with compromised immune systems, may do that. So one of my professional colleagues, Rob Cullen, is on this particular podcast here, and Rob and his partner Janet have a company called Rethinking Libraries. And
we need to meet, Rob.
yes, so their kind of initial focus here was on facilities planning and on space optimization, and of course that's changing now to say, well, how do we best utilize the space that we've now got? Are we just storing materials here? And not long ago, it was the big drive was libraries are offering more events, more community
Right.
events types of things. But with COVID now, that's sort of changed that dynamic, and the variables have changed. Rob and I were talking a bit about libraries and spaces and the joint use space. So why not have a Chamber of Commerce rent space inside the library, if you will, the workforce retraining types of things. And Rob made a comment about his church. They are building constructing a new building, but you're only going to use it very little hours per week. So they are partnering with 7 not-for-profits to join in this from the outset. And I thought, boy, that could be a real winner for libraries to start looking at repurposing and how can they be a valid asset for more of their community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so we just have a few minutes left here, and I want to get to the most important question, which is where to from here. So when we were originally talking, you and I, about this, that really the library app, if you like, is the next logical thing. Thank God it's finally here and moving forward. What do you see as next? And what does SOLUS see as next?
Yes, great question. We're about to pilot a next generation discovery interface that's more Netflix user experience look and feel, if you will, as opposed to the traditional library look and feel. That's going to be piloted by the London consortium.
Oh, wow.
In the UK.
Oh.
And, trying to give the libraries more modern interfaces to interact with, because libraries have been really good at being silos that you have to, get to the library and go to the library.
I know.
As opposed to how can we make this a little more broad-based types of things. So now that SOLUS is approaching 6,000 library locations, and you start thinking about e-content and indie publishers, is, wait a minute, maybe there's some opportunity here to look at content that may have some value to interplay in that particular ecosystem. The payments library, for anyone that's done payments in libraries, it's very painful. There's a couple of companies, Envisionware and Comprise are the 2 primary ones. There's probably a couple of smaller ones. But to make a payment or a fine or a fee or for an event is painful in library land. And so SOLUS is going to add the consumer model of paying by Apple Pay, Google Pay, or PayPal and make it quick. Now, while they're excited about that, I've also cautioned them, because you're entering library land and different municipalities, cities, county governments may have a say in that. So we want to offer that for free and just take a couple of pennies off of the transaction set from that, but trying to make that easy. So I think the mobility of the staff will be a huge fundamental change with the Gizmo. And we're not the only ones doing things in that space, right? There are other RFID vendors that are playing around with handhelds and this and that. But this sort of Swiss Army knife approach seems to have good value. And we have a bunch of piloted sites ready to go, and that'll probably be second quarter of 2021. COVID took us off on a different path for a bit.
Sure. Well, it actually really accelerated the market.
Yes, certainly did. As libraries are looking at kind of digital only for how can we wrap our digital assets and put that in an ecosystem. The other thing about this CMS that we're exploring now quickly is, wait a minute, if the libraries the hub of information in our community. The CMS could allow you to link various community groups.
Yep.
And it might be on a week-to-week, month-to-month, or what have you, because you can schedule content in and out. But I think the more libraries can align with other groups and city departments, county departments to show their value, then that's a positive for the library. Libraries are on the verge of being in a defensive position again with budgets, and this might be an opportunity to go on the offensive and say, hey, we're the knowledge people. We have all these assets. We can now start distributing them through mobile and other means within the community to show you the value that we have.
Right. And back to when you were talking about, you know, content, and, you know, I'm always a big proponent of libraries need to be really focusing on local content, which nobody else focuses on. And you mentioned India authors, local authors, and, you know, making them digital, for God's sake. You know, really looking at what is distinct in our community that will appeal to our community, and also show the value of the library, of a local institution library, to the funders.
That's a great, excellent point. Totally agree on that.
Okay, so we have a lot here. I'm going to open it up. We have 5 minutes left, so please unmute yourself. I didn't have time to read everything over here, but do unmute yourself and make a comment. What question do you have?
Question for John. That's what you're asking, Rebecca? What
Yeah.
Question for John? Well, I'll repeat the question that I just kind of responded to Stephen. You know, we're talking about innovation and things, and I think one of the things that holds libraries back, and this slowed our growth at Evance back in 20 years ago when we started that, is the first question on people's mind was, well, who's doing this near me? You know, I'm in California. Your clients are in New York, they're in Illinois, but who in California is doing this? And and 20 years later, it's still, when we talk to clients, like, okay, yeah, that's a great idea, but who's doing that here? I mean, how do we break through that provincialism in library innovation, like fear or whatever it is? I don't know.
Wow.
You know, we try to move one client at a time, but how do we get the market moving more?
We can't, and which in fact is what John was saying. I know you want John to answer, but I'm answering. What John was saying about, we can't build library memberships one family or one person at a time. And for you, you know, in the work that you're doing, Rob and John and Solus, to bring libraries along to build that market share, and to really, because all you're doing is you're finally bringing in retail and business models that really, libraries, to me, it's not even the provincialism. It's like, let's look at other sectors that are in fact using the same business processes we are and adopt from them, for God's sake. Now, John, I'll let you answer.
I'm gonna talk. Oh, okay, Jane's gonna butt in since he's quiet for a second. Robert, I'm really surprised. I did not know that about people saying near me.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I'm thinking about our Computers and Libraries and Internet Librarian virtual meeting that we had in September. And it really brought in a lot of international global people. And we had stories about libraries in Scotland or, you know, Ireland or whatever. And people really resonated with what they were doing. So, you know, I hope maybe if we're doing more of that, that people can listen and identify, even if it isn't next door. But that's really interesting.
I will say, I think libraries have been much quicker to embrace like space and like physical design things from other regions and other parts of, you know, other countries in particular. I mean, you know, the work that was going on in the Netherlands and Europe in particular, you know, influenced a lot of library design over the last 20 years.
Right.
But when it comes to tech, I don't see that same kind of embracing of that.
Interesting.
Stephen wants to respond to that.
Yeah.
Stephen had a comment, but you're muted, Stephen.
Stephen, are you responding to Robert?
Sorry, my space bar wasn't working. I've noticed that happening a lot lately. Well, Jane knows I'm always talking about the adoption curve. So in library land, we were able to identify the innovators and make sure we got our sites planned at the innovation level and then moved it to early adopters. A lot of this, I need to see something local. They're just not ready. And we need to get to that reference space where people have been through all the hard stuff because of an essentially conservative public money space, which may be valid, but it may not be valid. The other thing is at Cersei Dynex and at Gale Cengage, John knows that my hidden job description, as Pat Summers always told me, was kick the market in the ass. So I was encouraged by our board, executive team, and CEO to say things that were controversial just to get the conversation started. And I think I was pretty good at it. But it was the sort of stuff where it started to flow through that we redesigned the Cersei Dynex users groups into communities. We redesigned what's now Kasugi into an executive leadership track and a worker bee leadership track, because all of our relationships were with sysadmins and they have no leadership quadrant. So until you got to the director level, you couldn't make change happen. And the directors, when I was doing this, and it's more than 10 years ago now, were in awe of their techie folks and were afraid to ask them any questions. So until we built that conversation between the sysadmins and the leaders, so you could force the leaders to say, I know the system does this because Cersei Dynex told me in the executive forum, so you should implement it even though you think it's boring. All of our folks, this is the trouble with some of the open source ILSs, is it's fun for the programmers and it delivers very little value in terms of new customer interaction. They should be going with third-party apps and changing the customer relationships digitally, not like, so I'll add one last thing. We did an analysis of the 1,000 improvements that they wanted to make to Cersei when I started there. That was just Cersei before we got Dynex. And 95% of them improved the librarian's life, and only 5% of them improved the end user's life. And so after Barrett and I did that analysis, I said that 5% is moving to the top of the list. And then the second bucket is the pain in the ass customers, get rid of them. Make that go away.
Services are no longer required.
That's right.
No.
John, you agree?
Not get rid of the customer, but get rid of their problem because they're like a dog with a bone.
Right.
So invest the time and make that go away so that we can free up developers to work on customer experience.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We actually stopped all development and releases for 2 years on my advice in order to rebuild the entire architecture, go agile, go everything. Then we did the same thing at Gale because we didn't have the platform. We were band-aiding everything. And I said, until we stop band-aiding, we are never going to go forward. And someone who is fresh and doesn't have a band-aid is going to eat our lunch.
Well, I think that's really what John's been looking at for years and now is working on with SOLUS is no more band-aiding how we are letting people, making it easy for people to borrow physical and digital items. We haven't even gotten to the programs yet, John. And so
Right.
I want you to come back. You have to come back after the pilot with the London Consortium and talk with us about the new look and feel that's much closer to a Netflix, although God knows, what will Netflix be in a year? I don't know.
Yes.
John, what a delight. You have so much in your head and so much experience. And really, I did want to do a deeper dive on the linked data too, because I think that's something that we're not talking enough about in the broader sector. There's these little groups,
Right.
but the rest of the sector really doesn't understand what the implications are of this for them. So thank you so much, John.
My pleasure. Thanks for all of the great chat comments that were in the background there, and look
Great.
forward to continuing to learn more, question more, opinion on more.
Perfect. You just keep doing that velvet kick-ass. We love that. And thanks to everybody who tuned in, and more next month.
Bye, everybody.